Can we please note that the meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. I welcome members of the press and public who may be viewing this meeting remotely. We now move into the formal business of the meeting. Can we take the notice convening the meeting as read? Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Mr Mayor, we have apologies from Councillor T. Taylor, Alderman Forbes, Greenfield and Tate, and Councillor P. Smith and Councillor Checker have advised that they may be late to the meeting.
And Councillor... oh, come on, help us out. There's a councillor been in touch with me. Pat, while I'm thinking... Right. Scanlon, Linda. Councillor Scanlon. A nasty... Oh, sorry. Apologies?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. George Howe.
Any more? Gentlemen now.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Ciara Mercy and Stephen O'Brien.
Any more? One at the back.
Apologies, I wasn't aware if you had apologies from Councillor Scanlon. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Councillor Doris McKnight.
Yeah, I keep forgetting about it. The next item is the minutes of the last ordinary meeting of the Council held on the 2nd of March 2022. Can we agree those minutes? Councillor Hodgson, then Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just want to ask a point of clarification on the minutes. On page 5, it mentions that Peter Gibson, Elizabeth Gibson declared a prejudicial interest on the Conservative group amendment. However, then on page 16, it appears that those councillors' votes were recorded against that amendment. I just want to clarify whether tenancy or property ownership would be a prejudicial interest in that case.
Mr Mayor, through you, I can advise that ordinarily, yes, tenancies, property ownerships are disclosable pecuniary interests, but dispensations were granted to those members who applied for them to enable them to deal with the budget. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Fletcher.
Mr Mayor, page 4 of the minutes, I'm a member of the GMB, not Unison.
Apologies, we'll note that.
Of interest? No? Can I remind members that they are requested to wear face coverings during the meeting unless medically exempt, and they should only be removed when speaking by the microphones provided. Also, can I remind members to turn off their microphones when finished speaking? I believe we're now operating a council-like system that we had. If you press your microphone on, I understand the cameras will automatically come to that microphone position. So, okay with that? I'd also like to thank those members who have given...
Excuse me, Mr Mayor. To put your... Oh, it does seem to be working, but it's asking you the device and the... I've tried to put my card in as it's asked, and it says the device and the card holder do not match. But...
into the system. Then from then on, it'll be in operation. Right, where notice has been given, the members will be invited to speak at the appropriate time. If any member who hasn't given prior notice wishes to speak at any point during the meeting, they should please raise their hand to indicate and speak when invited to do so. It would also be of assistance if you could state your name. We move on to the sad part of the meeting, and it is with great sadness that I report that Honorary Alderman and former Councillor Mcclellan has sadly passed away. Michael was a retired insurance broker whose business was based in the city. He was elected to represent the Hendon ward from 1969 to 1972 in the St Peter's ward for 2002 to 2006, and then the Barnes ward from 2004 to 2010. He served on the former Public Works and Planning Committees, as well as scrutiny committees covering environment and community services and regeneration, and the former overarching Policy and Coordination Review Committee. He became an honorary alderman on the 10th of June 2014 in recognition of his eminent service to the council and to the people of the City of Sunderland. He fulfilled his role admirably over the years in assisting mayors, deputy mayors at the civic and other council events, or indeed at functions. Our thoughts are with his family and friends. And following on, councillors, today marks the anniversary of the first COVID-19 lockdown, and across the council, members and officers have supported the Maria Curie Day of Reflection. Before I ask you to observe a minute's silence, I had the honour of attending a service just before coming to this meeting at the Minster, where we remembered all the people that had lost loved ones in COVID. And we were then asked round the audience, after I've said my few words, to mention anyone that we had lost or that we wanted to remember. A lady there who organised it lost her father in COVID. Another gentleman lost his mum and dad. And I remembered Margaret Beck, who, believe it or not, on Monday is a year since she died. And I also said, and I'm sure I was right, that Margaret was probably the first death to COVID in our city. We lit candles, and I was proud to light a candle for Margaret. And then we were asked to sign our name and go outside and tie the ribbon, sign our name on a ribbon and tie it on the fence. And I'm sure our husband Richard wouldn't have minded that I did that for Margaret. So, as I say, we'll now stand for a moment's silence and think about the wars, the COVID, and of course Michael, who was a true gentleman. As the municipal elections in May approach, there are a number of our colleagues who have indicated that they will be retiring at the end of their current term of office. As this will be their last council meeting, I would therefore like to pay tribute to these members. If anyone would like to make a comment, and if any of the retiring councillors wish to respond and address the Council, I will offer an opportunity at the end of this announcement. Starting with the longest serving member, Councillor George Howe. George has lived in Sunderland for many years and was a candidate for Sunderland South in the general election 1987 and 1992. He is a graduate of the University of Toronto and the Sunderland Polytechnic and worked in several countries, particularly in the Middle East and Canada, as a quality control engineer, followed by several years as a teacher of English in Saudi Arabia. He returned to England in 1995 and was elected to represent the Freehold ward on the 2nd of May 1996. In his 26 years on the Council, he has served on many committees and outside bodies, of course too many to list. His key appointments included being a former Vice Chair on the scrutiny as a lead for the Public Health, Wellness and Culture. He has also served as a Governor on a number of schools across the city and as a Council representative on a number of regional bodies. Councillor Betty Gibson. Betty was elected on the 10th of June 2004 to represent the Doxford ward. Prior to being elected as a councillor, she worked at City of Sunderland College. Betty has also served on a great many committees during her time on the council. Her key appointments include being a chair and vice chair of the former Development Control Committees, the Environment and Attractive City Scrutiny Committees, as well as being a school governor and serving on organisations regionally and within her ward. Betty also enjoys working with and supporting volunteers. Councillor Shirley Ledbetter. Shirley has served as a councillor for the St Peter's ward twice. She was first elected in 2006 and served until 2010, when she was re-elected in 2014. Her key appointments have been within health and well-being by serving on scrutiny, the joint scrutiny committees with South Tyneside, the Health and Wellbeing Board as the Regional Northumberland, Tyne and Wear, North Durham STP. Shirley has also served as a school governor and on the Standing Advisory Committee for Religious Education. Councillor Michael Essel has represented 2 wards during his time on the council. He was first elected to the Barnes ward in 2010 and then in 2018 for the Riot ward. He has served on planning and scrutiny committees, the Tyne and Wear Fire and Rescue Authority, in addition to a number of other regional bodies, as well as on community associations, school governing bodies within both of the wards that he has served. Councillor Barbara Mclennan was elected to represent the Hendon ward in 2010. She is a former chief executive of a regional charity and helped to run a community interest company in her ward. She was previously a journalist, public relations practitioner, further educational lecturer, teacher and assessor of adults undergoing learning in the community. Since becoming a councillor, she has served on the corporate parenting and scrutiny committees, including health and well-being, and has also been a long-standing member of the Port Board and one of the adoption panels. She has also represented the council as a school governor, served on Chance Management Committee, Friends of Sunderland Museums, and previously represented the council on Sunderland Orphanage Foundation. Councillor Doris McKnight. Doris was elected in 2010 to represent the Castle ward. She's been actively involved in the local community for many years, from helping to run playgroups, parent and teacher associations, brownies, and her local church before becoming involved with the Board of City Challenge in 1993. She became a magistrate in 1997 and progressed on to be a chairman in the Adult Court and the Family Panel. During her time on the council, Doris has been the chair of the Scrutiny Coordinating Committee, as well as being chair and vice chair of the former licensing and regulatory committees, respectively. She has also served on regional bodies on health, transport, scrutiny, as well as the Northumbria Police and Crime Panel. Doris has served as the school governor to schools within her ward and is also a value trustee on the Hilton Castle Trust. Councillor Tony Taylor. Tony was elected in 2014 to represent the Washington East ward, as well as serving on the Economic Prosperity Scrutiny Committee and Planning Committees. Tony chaired the Tyne Weir Fire and Rescue Authority, as well as serving and chairing on a number of its committees. Councillor William Blackett was elected in 2018 to represent the St Chad's ward. He has served on the Economic Prosperity Scrutiny and Planning and Highways Committee, as well as being a member of the Appeals Panel. Councillor Neil McKnight. Neil was elected in 2018 to represent the Horton ward. He had served on the Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee and Scrutiny Coordinating Committee, as well as the Adult and Governors Committee and Corporate Parenting Board. He represented the Council regionally on the Tyne and Weir Trading Standards Joint Committee. Can I take this opportunity to thank all of those retiring councillors for their contribution? And if any member wishes to speak, will they please now indicate?
Mr Mayor, through you, we've received prior notice that Councillors Mullen, McKeith, S Johnston, Hartnack, Dixon and Doyle would like to speak. So perhaps if there's anyone else. Is that Councillor Foster? Councillor Mclennan? Councillor Essel? Councillor McKnight? Leader? Councillor Ledbetter? Thank you.
Right, we'll start. Oh, we switch, yeah. We'll start with the ones that we already indicated. Councillor Mullen.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. On behalf of my group, thanks to everybody who's retiring, but in particular, I just want to offer best wishes to Councillor Neil McKnight, who I've always gotten very well with, and who I think will be a great loss to the Labour Party because he's a very convincing speaker and always very pleasurable to work with in committees. And of course, to my old friend, Michael Essel, best wishes for the future, Michael. Within my own group, I'd just like to say a couple of words about the three retirees. William was elected in the same year as me, and he and I were the first in a series of Conservative gains over recent years, and between us we brought the Conservative group's median age down by about 2 decades. William is leaving local government to pursue a career in teaching history, and throughout his time on the council he's entertained many of you with his knowledge about the city's cultural and political history, and he can take credit, of course, for being among the first in recent times to highlight the cultural significance of the Bishop Wearmouth Chapel, even if the Sunderland Echo did give him the wrong ward, and we wish him well in his future teaching career. Shirley Ledbetter is somebody who has been incredibly supportive to younger colleagues within St Peter's in particular, but more generally within the group, and I know that is something that she takes great pride in, and she's worked very constructively with a number of members of other groups as well. In particular, I have to point out that she has a very close relationship with former councillors Barry Curran and Julia Jackson, and I know that she enjoys a very close friendship with Julia that she would want me to mention. During her time on the council, she has been involved particularly in health-related committees, drawing upon the experience that she had throughout her long career as a nurse. But I know that she would also want me to mention her long and distinguished career as the Conservative Group Whip, a period of unadulterated terror and no-nonsense discipline within our party. And as she comes to the end of her third and final term, we wish her a very happy and deserved retirement. And finally, George Howe, who can't be with us because he's sadly in hospital, has, as you've said, Mr Mayor, the longest continuous service of any councillor in the Conservative group and the third longest on the council overall. George, as he said, stood for Parliament twice, and in the latter of those two general elections, he received over 9,000 more votes than the Liberal Democrat candidate John Lennox. So if any of the Hetton councillors are seeking advice on how to beat Mr Lennox, perhaps they need to get in touch with George. Along with his wife, Pat, George is a celebrity of the local Conservative Party, and I'm sure that they'll continue to remain politically active together and enjoy together George's well-deserved retirement. Thank you, everyone.
Councillor McKeith.
Mr Mayor, he's just nipped out to the toilet.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. When you first become a councillor, there's no manual teaching you how to do the role. You've got to learn on the job, and it's something that's made much easier when you have someone like Shirley to mentor you. From telling me which officers to contact on certain issues, to giving a helping hand at ward surgeries, Shirley has been here for me at every step of the way. Shirley was first elected the council in 2006 when Josh and I, her ward colleagues, were still in infant school. So if that doesn't highlight Shirley's commitment to St Peter's, then I don't know what else will. Speaking just what Anthony said about Shirley having the iron grip as a whip, when she left that role, it didn't change. Josh and I are famous in the Conservative group for sorting every ward issue out by arguing with one another and eventually come to a conclusion. But sometimes we don't get the compromise, and that's when I'll let Shirley in on a secret. We call her the boss. And what Shirley says ultimately will break the tie and be how we move forward. I'm going to keep it fairly short and sweet now because, frankly, I don't want to accept that Shirley's really retiring, and Josh and I are going to miss her far too much. But I'd like to thank Shirley for everything she's done for me and for St Peter's. You're leaving behind a wonderful legacy, and it's been an honour to spend the last year working alongside you.
Councillor Hartnack.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. What you and others have already mentioned about Councillor George Howe, but as a Fulwell Ward councillor, it would be remiss of me not to mention the fondness by which many Fulwell residents refer to George. His calm, friendly disposition and popularity is such that he spends many an hour with folk in groups across the ward, drinking their coffee, eating their biscuits, frequently, daily, whilst at the same time listening and getting really good outcomes for residents. The electoral majorities he has achieved are testament to his popularity, and he will be missed by many Fulwell residents, as we will miss him also as a ward and party colleague. George would have loved to have been here for what would have been his last full council meeting tonight, but he is quite unwell, as has been suggested. He's been in and out of hospital over the last couple of weeks. And he has struggled over the past few months to get to meetings here at the new City Hall, as parking arrangements for disabled badge holders, he has noted, appear to be quite inadequate. Now, knowing George, as we all do, he will likely be making it his business to write to the Echo, as he frequently does, raising the issue of disabled parking at the City Hall with the editor and readers. I'm sure that all members and officers present would wish to join with me to wish George and Pat well in dealing with his current illness, and hope they both enjoy a very long, happy and healthy retirement from local politics. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Mayor. There is sadness tonight, of course, amongst the ranks of the Conservative group because of the recent death of Alderman Mcclellan. Been unwell for some time, but when he was in full flow, when he spoke, he tended to listen, and it was one of my regrets that I didn't be on the same scrutiny committee meeting as he, because he would be something to listen to. He took his roles as a councillor and as honorary alderman very, very seriously indeed. I shall miss both George Howe and Shirley Ledbetter, and of course William Blackett too. Shirley's been a good friend over many years. Both George and Shirley have their different styles, playing a very important role as hard-working councillors for their wards, for the city, and for the Conservative Party in Sunderland over many years. We were down to less than a handful when George Howe was a councillor, but he relished the battle and he kept the flag flying until we recovered political ground to where we are today. Typically, both have carried on until health issues kind of finally overtook them. There's been service until it was no longer possible to continue, and I wish them a happy retirement, and I'm sure I'll be in touch with Shirley over the months ahead. And it is sad to report tonight that George is unwell. I'd like to say a few words about a couple of Labour councillors who are retiring from their duties and with whom I've worked in the east area of the city for some years, namely Councillor Betty Gibson and Councillor Barbara Mclennan. Councillor Gibson has played a leading role in the East Area Committee for many years as chair. She's scrupulously fair, party political allegiances are never mentioned, and we've all worked well together supporting the various funding projects in our wards. I've worked even closer with Councillor Gibson this last council year as her vice chair, and it reinforced what I already knew, that she cares deeply about our many groups and charities in the East Area and would do everything she could to help them. Indeed, I was at a function about age and well-being this morning with Councillor Gibson at the Rach Carter Centre. She also chaired the regular VCS meetings at various locations throughout the East Area and displayed the same characteristics there that I've outlined above. It was clear she was highly regarded by both council officers and those from the voluntary sector. I've tended to shadow Councillor Gibson because I've also been on planning committees for many years, and where she was chair of the Development Control South. So again, she's served the city well in that very important role, and I wish her a happy retirement. Barbara Mcclellan, I find one of the most interesting people on our whose work I read at first hand in an investigatory capacity during the 1990s. Area committees were never dull when she would ask her questions. We would meet up on a personal basis with her husband Ian, with Councillor Wood, at various events in the East Area and in her Hendon ward, at St Ignatius Church, for example, back on the map, and she was always good company. I'm not privy to the workings of the Labour Party, and I say this as a compliment rather than anything else, but it's always been a bit of a mystery to people like myself and Councillor Peter Wood why Councillor Mcclennan, with her ability and background, did not have a much more prominent role within committees on the council. Maybe she did not seek it, but whatever the reason, it does not really matter now, except that it's important to say here that her inquiring nature certainly gained our respect, and I, for one, have always admired people with a bit of character ready to speak their mind. I wish Councillor Mcclennan a happy retirement. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to speak briefly in praise of my colleague, Councillor George Howe, who will be retiring in May, and it's unfortunate that George cannot be here this evening, as colleagues have mentioned already, and I'm sure members will join me in wishing George and Pat all the very best at this time. George has served Fulwell Ward and its predecessors as councillor for 26 years, as you say, longer than I've been alive. And so I think it is fair to say that George is somewhat part of the Fulwell furniture. He is known to residents as a hard-working, diligent councillor who has dedicated decades of his life to public service. When I was first elected, George showed me the ropes, so to speak. He tutored me in the art of holding a ward surgery, diffusing tension in a public meeting, and getting what you want out of council officers, though I should say he wasn't entirely successful on that last point, something with which I think members from all sides can sympathise. He was and is always happy to give advice and muck in when his colleagues are in a bind. I'm proud to count George as a friend. I hope he enjoys his well-deserved retirement, and I'm sure he will continue to keep a very close eye on the Sunderland Conservatives as we go from strength to strength. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I firstly give me best wishes to all the councillors that are leaving for whatever reason. It's sadness that Councillor McKnight is leaving due to ill health. She would have wanted to be here tonight, as you all know. Doris is very strong-minded, but she hasn't been too well lately. But last night she sent us an email and says, read that out at full council. Colleagues, I am sorry I cannot attend tonight's meeting, but after the last year or so of ill health and isolating for operations, I caught COVID, so I'm again isolating. Most of you know I was very active within the Labour Party for many years and never really wanted to be a councillor until we got involved in the HLF for Hilton Castle. At the time I was told by the then late leader, you need to be on the inside to get things moving. So that started my career as a councillor. I have always been involved with the local community, but when you receive a thank you from the local residents, when you have been able to help them, no matter how small, is rewarding itself. To me, that is what a councillor is all about. I have some great memories to leave, especially my mayoral year. One of the highlights was meeting the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, also having lunch with the Queen Elizabeth after the decommissioning of HMS Ocean. I have been very lucky, such great ward colleagues, which is true, to work with, who are also my good friends. Just a warning to both of them, you will not get rid of me, I'll still be around, which is true. Through Councillor Foster, can I thank past and present colleagues who I have classed as friends over the years and still keep in touch. Councillor Diane Snowden for stepping in as chair of scrutiny due to my illness. Lastly, a thank you to the officers who have been a fountain of wisdom at times when frustration has kicked in. And I could go on, but maybe over a cup of coffee at Hilton Castle tea room whenever anybody passes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mclennan.
With your permission, Mr. Mayor, I have the same condition, as it were, as the leader, and if I don't have to stand, it would be helpful. I've got a stick I can lend him at the end of the meeting. Right, it's hard for me to believe that it is 12 years since I had the honour of taking over the role of Hendon Councillor from former Mayor Mary Smith. At the time, it took some very active persuasion to get me to put my name forward, and I could not have imagined I would have been around for so long. Those who know me well understand my former career as an investigative journalist on the Sunderland Echo did not always make for happy reunions in the Civic Centre. I won many regional and national journalism awards for work I did digging into the corruption at the council 30 years ago. People went to prison and others lost their jobs. Those people who think there is corruption here in Sunderland today should have seen what went on all those years ago. They might sing with a different tune. Looking around the room, I can see Councillor Peter Wood, Councillor Paul Stewart, Councillor Peter Gibson, Councillor Louise Farthing as about the only ones, and please forgive me if I've missed anybody out, survivors from my days on the Echo. As we have moved into a new HQ building and every year seems to bring fresh new faces onto the council, I do worry that some of the crucial lessons we learned in years past are about to exit our corporate memory. The senior office cohort has undergone similar extensive reshaping, with the very notable exception of the head of legal services, quite the survivor, or maybe just a masochist, certainly an asset worth retaining. I have some wonderful memories of work I have done with local people who often felt they had nowhere else to turn. Alcoholics, drug users, the homeless, and especially the people who live in the many hostels that are spread across Hendon. I take great pleasure in having played an active role in closing down Camrex House and was not sorry to see the later closure of the Norfolk Hotel. Some people and cases stand out more than others. Maybe my most unusual, and there have been plenty of contenders, was visiting one of the most run-down bedsits you could possibly imagine about 3 years ago. A 3-storey building just outside the city centre. In the doorway, an unconscious person who stank of drink. Going up the stairs, the windows on the landing had been put through. The door to the flat I was visiting was like a key scene from The Shining. a big hole in the middle where Jack Nicholson could have poked his axe. Inside there were 3 men. 2 were propped against the wall and clearly on a trip somewhere out of their own minds. And the 3rd person was the resident I had come to see, lying on the bed in just his underwear and accompanied by a large kitchen knife. His only set of clothes had been stolen by a flatmate to use as a disguise to try to avoid paying debts to drug dealers, hence the hole in the door. This led to a very intense conversation with his landlord, who, accompanied by 2 heavies who blocked daylight to my diminutive frame, had just happened to turn up at the front door at this point, and an urgent referral to social services. A close second was campaigning back in 2014 about the illegally opened Swingers Club, which was not welcomed in a building next to a church. How amazing it was to then have them reach out for help after the club was broken into and very important equipment had been stolen. The loss tied everyone in knots, so to speak, for months. Maybe my fondest memory is working as a trustee at Trafalgar Square Almshouses to encourage fellow trustees to invest in a £1 million plus refurbishment of the historic site in the East End that is now fit for purpose for many years to come. Such was the success of the work that Princess Anne honoured us by visiting the square in 2021 in her role as Master of Trinity House. Most people in Sunderland have very little idea of just how many vulnerable people are out there in our communities. Living in a wealthy area does not make you immune for vulnerability either. It is the reason why all elected members of the council need to share ideas, collaborate and work for the mutual benefit of everyone. The time for cheap point scoring on expenses and allowances is over. People expect and need better from us than that. They are essential. It is essential that we help them in the coming months. To those people who will be elected in May for the first time, and to those that have chosen to try, including my husband yet again, and return, I have a parting message. Always try to put the needs of the people before your own political ambitions. With the social, economic and structural challenges that we know lie ahead of us, only a real team effort can see this city survive and thrive and leave no one behind. Best of luck, everyone.
Thank you very much. Your journalist skills certainly showed through there. Thank you. Councillor Mcklesson.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Before I start, I'd actually like to pay a small tribute to Councillor Mcclellan. I followed Michael in Barneswold. He retired in 2010, and I fought his vacant seat, and I worked hard to win the seat, if I'm being honest. And every door I knocked on, we know Mcclellan, we know Mcclellan, we know Mcclellan. He was an absolutely outstanding local councillor. Now, many of you will remember 2010, the local elections. Lee Martin, ever the salesman, had charmed some Ashcroft money out of Lord Ashcroft, I expect. And they Tories had actually spent an absolute fortune thinking they were going to win Sunderland Central. And they lost by about 7,000 votes. It was a fairly tense evening, and feelings were running high. And I eventually won by something under 200 votes, I think. But the person who told me I'd won, and the first person to offer me his hand in congratulations, was Councillor Mcclellan. Even when things weren't going his way, and it was quite an exciting evening, and feelings were running high. He was ever the gentleman, and I'll never ever forget it. And I'll tell you what I've always told him, mind. I don't think I would have beaten him had he stood that year. So anyway, it's 12 years. It's gone absolutely in the blink of an eye. And I suppose it's quite usual to have a think back about the changes in the city and what's happened in those 12 years. And of course, there's the redevelopment of the Vauxhall site, as we're standing in some of the beginnings of that. many of you will remember, you particularly, Mr Mayor, remember that the vault site was allegedly sold on a handshake in a pub in the City of London for 40% above market value, sold to Tesco's, whose business model at the time was to land bank and then to squeeze, to pressure local authorities to pay a premium rate for the land or give them permission to build a Tesco's. And then Tesco's got their site on Genevieve's. Who remembers Genevieve's? One for the old ones. There you go. See, Rock Night and Friday night. I knew you. And they got their site on Genevieve's and decided to sell this site, and off we went. Then there's the Spire Bridge. As I'm remembering all these, cold shivers are running down my back. Who remembers the Spire Bridge? First of all, it was sinking into the ground. Obviously, people forgot about the 8 months of piling that went on. Dunk, 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 dunk. All you could hear for all around the city. Anyway, then there was a split in the spire, apparently, which of course wasn't true. It was just the fact that the paint had peeled off due to the beast from the east. Then, of course, there's the IAMP. How prescient that is for us now, as we try to be free of hydrocarbons and Russian oil and gas and from various places around the world. And I also remember some of the great officers I worked with, some outstanding officers. Some of them are robbing a living, to be fair, but I've worked with some excellent officers as well. When I first got elected, I was given the vice chair of the West area, and the area then was an excellent officer by day, and by night he was a punk rock legend and punk rock singer, and I knew him very well. Someone's blushing already. I'm of course talking about the mighty Bill Blackett. And if you want to know what a punk rocker's son does to rebel, he buys a nice suit, gets a nice haircut, becomes a member of the Tory party, joins the council. He's a lovely fellow, Bill, and I wish him every success in his new career. This is probably the exact time I should remind him of his misspent youth as a member of the Labour Party when I sorted him out some work experience in Julie Elliott's office down in London. Glad to see you've got a proper job just on the back of my work experience there, Bill. Congratulations. The first incident I had working with Bill was I didn't know him very well. I got a phone call, you know the phone call where they start off angry and they could go either way. It's either going to get more angry or less. Are you my councillor? So I don't know, what street do you live in? I live in Barnesview. Now, for those who don't know Barnesview, it's a beautiful street. It's large, semi-detached and detached houses overlooking Barnes Park, as you may expect. And it's a lovely street, lovely place to live. This fella said to me, he said, the school kids have, they've been at the cement and they've drawn a willy in the cement. He said, I've phoned the council have sent someone out and they're not going to do anything about it because it's not a trip hazard. I said, I beg your pardon. You know when somebody says something to you and you've heard every word, you've understood what they've said, but you still don't believe what they've said to you? I said, I beg your pardon. So he repeated the same again. I said, are you at home now? He said, yes, I am. Because I was at home as well. I only lived 5 minutes. I said, I'll be 5 minutes. So I went down, driving down Barnesview, red-faced man standing there. I thought, he's mine. Pulled up. I said, so what's happened then? So he's told me. And then he came out and he said, because it's not a trip hazard, they're not going to do anything about it. So I said, show me what you're talking about. So sure enough, there's been a fresh laid piece of concrete there. And there's what I can only describe, well, I don't know what the young people call it nowadays. But in my youth, it was called a bus stop knob. You know, not very anatomically correct, but one of the kids had obviously just drawn a willy in the thing. So anyway, I phoned up Bill Blackett. I said, Bill, I said two things. I explained what had happened. I said, first of all, I said, you're going to have to give this officer a little bit of advice. He said, well, he's completely wrong. It's an obscenity, and it's. I said, second of all, he said, you're going to have to get someone to come out and chop it out and relay the thing. Oh no, it just gets rubbed off. I thought I was in a Ben Hill sketch, but I just left it at that, you know, as you do, because that sort of thing doesn't go on in Barnesview, can I tell you? And the second one was I had a woman phone me this time. And I swear to God, if I never moved from this spot, this is exactly what she said to me. She said, I answered the phone, my name's Mrs. William, my mother hasn't had her bush trimmed for 50 years. So now, I thought this was one of the taxi lads winding me up. I really did. But I was at a computer when I took the call. I asked what the mother's name was and what her address was. Sure enough, she's on the electoral roll. So you think. Turns out the lady's 80, she's going blind, and her bush was like overhanging Barnes Park Extension. Now, it's one of those, you could have gone to the city solicitors, is this our responsibility? Do we have to? Da-di-da-di-da. Or you could just use your good sense and phone up Bill and say, here, Bill, do us a favour. Sure enough, there's walking my dog through Barnes Park Extension sometime later, and of course, there's one of the lads trimming this bush back, because there's nothing worse than unkempt bushes, I'm sure we can all agree. Then I packed in for a year, because I wanted to defend myself. I was the first Labour councillor to win Barnes, and I wanted to be the first one to defend it, so I defended it successfully. With majority window down to 140 by then, because people had got to know me, some would say. And I came back and I started to work with two more excellent officers. Bill had moved on to wherever they've sent him. And I worked with Helen Peverley and Gilly Stanley, who are another two absolutely cracking officers. And I've also got to give an honourable mention to the area, or whatever they're called now, at the east area, Nicole McConnell. She's absolutely first rate. And the area officers, in my experience, have been absolutely fantastic. And of course, there's been some personal successes. Helped to design and implement the parking management scheme around the hospital. That's since been used all around the city as the template, which is a positive thing. When I first got elected, I campaigned on getting a 20-mile-an-hour zone around Barnes Infants and Junior School. A child had been knocked over by a van, and fortunately they were not seriously injured, but it absolutely scared the bejesus out of everyone, as I'm sure you can imagine. So I got elected on that, and I was delighted to get that done. Then everybody wants one, of course, all of the local schools and all the local councillors, et cetera, et cetera. So Paul Watson at that point decided it was going to be a matter of council policy, ably supported by Harry Truman, of course, and Mellis Bedding. That became council policy. So every time I drive past the 20-mile-an-hour zone around the school, I think, well, you didn't do so bad, did you? I helped secure funding for the community room at Richard Avenue School. Now, that's used for outreach into the Bangladeshi community. Particularly the women are very difficult to get to access medical treatment. They run various things out of there, which is delightful. And, of course, most recently, it's the defibrillators we're getting fitted in right. Now, I can't take all the credit for this. Many of you remember, of course, Councillor Margaret Crosby, a couple of meetings ago, mentioned the lack of defibrillators, and she highlighted that there's none in Ryhope. So I emailed my colleagues, Councillor Ali, Councillor Buick. They didn't respond because, of course, they were taking part in the meeting. We had a quick meeting after, and they were absolutely on board with the idea. So I believe we've got 4 or 5, is it now? Defib's going to get fitted in Ryhope. So, Margaret, you've done a bit of good there as well. And it was a delight to help. Well, that's how it's always been. I've always been in mixed wards. And, you know, when you come to this sort of meeting, well, it's just panto, isn't it, really? I boo you, you boo me, you chip me, I chip you, you know, da-di-da-di-da. And then we know how the vote's going to go, because it's going to go down party lines. But actually, in reality, councils work together because we're all here for the same thing, believe it or not. We're all not corrupt. You know, we're all not just in it for the allowances and all of that. We're actually here to do a little bit. I've never had a special responsibility allowance that hasn't cost me money, to be quite honest. For the time it's took me off other things, more lucrative things. And I must mention my failures, I suppose. It's only right. Is I've not been able to stem the growth of traffic lights in this city. What is it about our planning management people, our road management people? They do love a traffic light, don't they? They're everywhere. And what's this with traffic lights on roundabouts? I've read in your latest leaflet that apparently Labour councillors have stopped more traffic lights on the roundabout of the Broadway. Well, it wasn't me, but whoever it was, well done, and keep up the good work. They're an absolute nightmare. And I would just like to implore the leader and the chief exec that if we're serious about becoming a zero carbon city, perhaps we could fit some timing lights on these traffic lights with the roundabouts on, so they're not on 24 hours a day. And by the way, you can get rid of the traffic lights at the bottom of by B&Q in Ryop as well. Absolute bedlam there. Anyway, listen, thanks very much, everybody. It's been fantastic. I'm glad I did it. I'm not going to do it again. It's been emotional. Take care, everybody. Cheers. Bye now.
There we are, colleagues. You get entertained as well at council meetings, and I'm sure if you want tickets for Michael's next show, you can see him outside. Move on to the next one, Councillor Neil McKnight.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If you don't mind, Mr Mayor, if yourself and colleagues would just indulge me, I'd just like to pay, before I say a few words about me and my ward colleagues, I'd just like to pay tribute to Councillor Alderman Michael Arnott, if you don't mind. I'm dreadfully saddened to hear about Michael's passing. Michael and I sat together on the Regeneration Scrutiny Committee between 2004 and 2007. And I need to take you to task, Mr Mayor, you forgot to mention that I was a ward colleague from ward councillor from 2004 to 2007, Washington East. Our chair at that time was a colleague who we all paid tribute to at the last council meeting, Florence Anderson. My main memory of that committee was the full and frank scrutiny of council officers and the chief officer of Gen 2. Mike had a calm but forensic approach to questioning, whereas my approach was somewhat little less diplomatic at times, I think it's fair to say, with Florence giving us all the freedom to ask and follow particularly probing lines of inquiry. Michael, to me, was a classic One Nation Conservative. He always projected his values of integrity and decency. We sometimes differed in our political outlook, but his warmth as a human being always trumped those differences. I feel privileged to have known him and having served alongside him both on committee and in council. I think in the final sort of summing words about Michael Arnott are, I think the Conservative Party, City of Sunderland Council and local politics has lost a great servant, and all are much diminished by his passing. So if you don't mind, Mr Mayor, I'll say a few words about, obviously I'm not going to be here after tonight. I'd just like to say thank you to Councillor Anthony Mullen for his kind words. It's greatly appreciated, colleagues. It does go to show that we do have the opportunity to reach out across the aisle and do great things for the city. We all, as Councillor Russell said, we all are here to do the job for the people we serve. So thank you, Anthony. My decision to stand down came after a great deal of soul-searching. However, balancing family life, council duties and a full-time NHS career have been becoming increasingly challenging, particularly during the pandemic and the challenge in my work with COVID recovery for the NHS. I'd like to say a particular thank you to my ward colleagues, Juliana Heron and John Price. Both are inspirational friends and councillors and have extended a great deal of support with my council duties when my work responsibility has been almost overwhelming. They've been the real power behind all the investment that's coming into Houghton, and I can't pay tribute enough for them, so thank you both. So from May, I'll be spending more time at my second homes, namely Philadelphia Cricket Club and Houghton Rugby Club. So my wife's not going to get off with it that easily. So I intend to do a lot more volunteering and a lot more coaching. I will take the opportunity to say, see you later, because this is not a final goodbye. As to what comes next, well, watch this space. I will miss the debate and the camaraderie and the friendship and sometimes the rivalry across the chamber and the opportunity to lob the occasional brick at the plate glass window of pomposity, which is always great sport. So I think to conclude, I've kind of sort of wrapped my brains and tried to think of a suitable Oscar Wilde quote, and I couldn't. The only one that sprang to mind was Spike Milligan of all people. Okay? Spike said he left with his head held high and his feet held higher as they threw him out into the street. Thank you, colleagues.
Councillor Ledbetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If this had been a movie, the music would begin. Andre Bocelli would be singing, "It's Time to Say Goodbye." Councillor Graham Miller will be taking his Persil white hanky out of his pocket to wipe a tear from his eye. However, this is not a movie, this is Sunderland City Council. And it is time to say goodbye. The spirit is willing, but unfortunately the flesh is getting weaker. I'm leaving St Peter's Ward in the more than capable hands of Councillor McKeith and Councillor Johnson. I know I'm supposed to be supporting them, but in actual fact, more and more they have been supporting me. And I really thank them both for that. It's nice to see our numbers now we're gaining numbers, and that is thank you to Councillor Mullen for his leadership and Councillor James Doyle for his piece, the deputy. I would also appreciate all the members of the Conservative Party for the help and kindness that they've shown to me over the past few years. And finally, I would like to thank everyone, regardless of their political affiliation within this chamber, for their help, kindness and support that has been shown to me during my tenure as a councillor for St Peter's. And in that, I know Councillor Mullen has alluded to this, Councillors Barry Cullen and Councillor Julia Jackson, who were with me as my partners in St Peter's Ward. And we worked together as a team. And in fact, I'm still a good friend of Julia Jackson, and we still keep in touch. So once again, everyone, thank you. And it's time to say goodbye. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Graham Miller, Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too just want to very quickly say a couple of words about Mclennan. I found him to be a true citizen of the city. He was an old-style Conservative of the First Order. I remember meeting him in Fawcett Street, where his office for his insurance business was, up 3 rickety flights of stairs. And it was a busy old day, and he invited me up for a cup of tea, and I just couldn't face climbing those stairs and even more importantly, coming down them. But he was a very good servant to the city, and I am genuinely saddened by his death. So I'm sure everybody in this chamber feels the same. I do want to say a few words about opposition councillors, and I'll start off with my great opponent across the chamber, George Howe. I think it's fair. George and I agreed on absolutely nothing politically. But he was a combative Conservative in the chamber, along with Peter and Michael, back when the Conservative group was much smaller, and he never let that worry him. We did agree on one thing: the city had to be fought for because the city deserved more. It was just our method of getting there that would cause us to cross swords. So please pass on my personal wishes to George and his wife, who does great work dealing with domestic abuse and violence against girls and women in the city. And I do wish him all the best. Shirley, if I had a white hanky, I would indeed have been dabbing at my eye, because you and I go back to the start of the Health and Wellbeing Board
when they came into creation, and you have always been an excellent councillor, helping the council make the right decisions on our health matters. And recently, that's been shown on the Outbreak Control Board, where you've attended them with me to ensure that our public health dealings with COVID have been the strongest. And I do thank you for that service. It's very much appreciated, and please enjoy your retirement. I'm sure you will be missed, and not just by me. What do you say about Bill Blackett Jr.? Well, I met his family collectively at the Remembrance Day last year, and it was genuinely nice to meet you all. Quite how he's your dad, I've no idea. Got to be honest. Got to be honest. But meeting your sister, meeting your mum, it was lovely to have that conversation with you, William, and all the best for the future going forward. Regarding my Labour councillors, I will miss them all, probably some more than others. But they have all been strong servants of the city. They've all worked tirelessly in their wards of that, I have no doubt. I want to especially mention Doris. Doris McKnight's been a great servant to the city as Chair of Overarching Scrutiny. She's done a brilliant job there. She's been a great Chief Whip for the Labour Group when she was the Chief Whip for the Labour Group, giving real focus, purpose and discipline to what then was a bigger group than it is now, and without any fear of the then leader, because Doris, as Neil will tell you, is fearless. So with that, Mr Mayor, it's a case of thank you everyone for your service. It's genuinely appreciated. I'm sure everybody will be missed. And we then must move on to the next set of councillors. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Have I missed anyone that wishes to speak? Betty, is there anyone else? Okay, Betty, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, I would like to thank Councillor Michael Dixon for his kind words. Thank you, Michael. It's been an honour to represent the residents of Doxford Ward for 18 years. Also a privilege to work with the many volunteers, and the pandemic certainly showed us how many volunteers we have. At times, being a councillor has been very challenging, but rewarding and enjoyable, and hopefully I have made a difference. That was my aim, to make a difference. My good wishes to this council for the future. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bernigan.
Hello, thank you. This will be short. Obviously, William's me ward colleague, and I thought it was only right that one of us spoke. You were the first one that I met between the two years, and you've been always welcoming. You're a book of knowledge, and I wish you all the luck in the future. The other thing that I quickly wanted to say was just Neil McKnight. That was my first ever committee meeting that I went to. You welcomed us. You have always been great, as did Michael Butler. And I wish you all the best of luck. Everybody who's retiring. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Well, I've been around long enough, fortunate or unfortunately, to have known all of you and known a lot of them that's gone, and there were great characters amongst them. So personally, I would like to thank all of you that are retiring for your service. Really appreciate it, and all the very best in whatever you do going forward. Stay safe, look after yourself, and look after the family. Without the family, you wouldn't have been here. So look after yourselves. And that concludes my announcements. We now move into, and I would like to invite the leader to give us an update on the COVID-19. Leader.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity once again this afternoon to provide an update to Council on the COVID-19 pandemic. As ever, I need to begin by paying tribute to the phenomenal effort by residents, volunteers, businesses, public sector organisations and service providers to keep the city running and recovering strongly from the pandemic and the effects of lockdown. After the surge in infection rates in January due to the Omicron variant, we have seen figures going in the right direction and infection rates reducing week on week. But now, with the lifting of all legal restrictions by the government and the advent of the new BA2 subvariant, the pressure is persisting on our hospitals across the North East, with the number of patients admitted beginning to come back up. There are far fewer people in hospital with COVID-19 at the moment than in January, but we must all have our wits about us in the wake of these recent developments and cases being on the rise. In the week up to the 11th of March, rates for Sunderland, the North East and England were increasing, whereas they'd been coming down steadily before. At that point in time, there were 350 cases per 100,000 in Sunderland, 375 cases per 100,000 in the North East, and 580 cases per 100,000 in England. Based on previous experience of how infection rates rise and at times surge, we know that unfortunately the Sunderland and North East rates are set to rise further and potentially significantly further if we take the England rate as a measure, as throughout the pandemic we have been a couple of weeks behind London and the south of the country once infection rates start going up. I had COVID myself a few weeks ago, Mr. Mayor, and I could only be hugely thankful that I'd had all the doses of the COVID-19 vaccine I was eligible for, because there is no doubt that it protected me from being far more poorly than I was. From the onset of my symptoms through to testing negative, I never want to have that feeling of being so ill again. And it wasn't a lot of fun suffering with the physical effects of COVID that I had, but I really counted my blessings that I was highly likely to be okay after a few days, thanks to the vaccine. So speaking from personal experience, I cannot emphasize enough how massively important it is to people themselves and to those around them that everyone takes up all the doses of the vaccine they are eligible for. I've talked before about the creation of the vaccines being a game changer in the country's battle against COVID-19, and it's no exaggeration to say that it's a life changer and indeed a lifesaver too. And we don't only owe it to ourselves and our loved ones, but to the NHS and the care sector as well. They have worked tirelessly to a superhuman degree for 2 full years now throughout this pandemic, being faced with unprecedented levels of demand, but with much reduced resources, as absence rates due to sickness and self-isolation have had a serious impact on their own workforces. As I think I said last time, Mr. Mayor, the root cause of the acute difficulties and challenges faced with demand far outstripping capacity is unfortunately the government's underfunding of these sectors that are the heart and backbone of our country, and the government's complete failure to plan for this or any other type of national crisis. So let's try and redress the balance even just a little and make sure that we in Sunderland are doing what we can to support our NHS and care workers by getting all our vaccinations fully up to date. Our latest figures show that we have 85.2% of eligible people in Sunderland with their first dose, 80.4% of the people with their second dose, and 62.7% with their third dose or booster. So please let's get those figures up and urge everyone around us to book an appointment if they've still got jabs to get. We are a resilient and determined city, of that there is no doubt. And whilst infection rates are on the rise, and it will impact all organisations in some way, and the prime example is the Brew and Bake Cafe is closed tonight because of COVID. It is on the rise in the city. incredible efforts continue to go into ensuring that particularly vital frontline services are kept going across the city and our most vulnerable residents are supported, protected and have everything they need. And there is so much more positivity about continuing to recover strongly from the pandemic, Mr. Mayor, and a real buzz around the city as our ambitious and transformational regeneration plans take shape more and more with every passing week. Mr. Mayor, on Thursday, you presided over the official opening of this wonderful City Hall, one of many significant developments here on the Riverside Sunderland site, described as the UK's most exciting regeneration site. But not as exciting as watching you trying to cut that ribbon when it was windy with all that traffic, with the media trying to listen to your speech and a crowd of people around you very excited to be watching the Mayor officially opening the building. I thought you did a brilliant job, Harry, given the circumstances, and well done. With 2 more office buildings under construction behind us, taking us towards our target of 10,000 more high-quality jobs in the city centre for our residents, construction is set to start on the new eye hospital just across the way behind the Conservative group, the Culture House about to be created across the road behind the Mayor, work to begin on the new pedestrian fruit bridge just here behind the public gallery, connecting communities across the river, and then on the other side, the construction of the Housing Innovation and Construction Skills Academy in Sheepfolds and the new eSports Centre next to the Stadium of Light. I don't think there is any city that could demonstrate a stronger recovery from COVID-19 and a bigger determination to create a bright and successful future for everyone in a dynamic, healthy, vibrant and smart city. So let's make sure everyone can enjoy and benefit from the exciting things in store and keep on playing our part to keep COVID-19 at bay. I know and understand that everyone welcomes the return towards normality and freedom from the legal restrictions we've lived with for a long time now, but I cannot emphasise strongly enough how important it is for us all to keep acting responsibly and to continue to be aware of the real danger COVID poses if we allow efforts to fall by the waysides. It would be nice to see more people in this room wearing masks. Some people can't, and I fully appreciate that, but there are far too many people not wearing masks, and if COVID continues to rise, it puts all of us at jeopardy again, including those of us who've had COVID. We've simply got to keep on being mindful of whatever situation we're in and think about how we can prevent the virus from spreading. That means following the latest guidance on testing and isolation, maintaining social distance still, and wearing a face covering in enclosed spaces, especially around vulnerable people. Please, let's do all the right things and make the right choices and give consideration for each other. There are many more fantastic things to come in Sunderland, creating lots of opportunity of all kinds for our residents. So let's keep up the good work and not give an inch to COVID-19, because as we all know, it will then take a mile. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll conclude my update. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can we note the update from the Leader? Thank you. We now move on to the Deputy Leader to give us an update on the Council's citywide approach to carbon reduction. Thank you, Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to update members regarding the ongoing progress being made in relation to our carbon neutral goals. Work has continued to progress in each of the strategic priority areas set out in the low carbon framework in recent months. I am pleased to highlight the following activity. Looking first at the built environment. The City has been awarded Warm Homes funding of £628,000 to support the installation of 135 air source heat pumps in private rented or owner-occupied properties, with energy performance certificate ratings of E, F or G, as well as a further £252,000 funding to deliver a valuable complementary energy efficiency advice and support programme in partnership with Groundwork, Green Doctors and the Citizens Advice Bureau. The Council has also been successful in securing a grant from the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, working closely with Gen 2, and has been granted over £1.2 million funding to deliver a joint project which, together with investment from Gen 2, will deliver a total improvement programme of £2.6 million. The project aims to improve the Energy Performance Certificate, or EPC, rating of 604 properties across the city and bring properties with EPC D, E and F ratings up to EPC C or D standard. It's a bit of a tongue twister, that one. And we are also now approaching the end of the Ego and EgoFlex delivery process in Sunderland, through which, since January 2021, the Council has assisted 312 properties with heating and insulation measures and has attracted nearly £737,000 of utility funding to support energy efficiency improvements to homes right across the city. In terms of our green infrastructure, more than 15,000 tree and hedge plants are currently being planted at Elmore Park, together with the new wildflower meadow, across an area of over 5 hectares. Yesterday, the Mayor helped us to plant a ceremonial tree to commemorate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee and the Queen's Canopy, as well as the launch of the North East Community Forest. And I gratefully thank Mr and Mrs and Madam Mayor for attending that ceremony yesterday. Through this new forest, the City Council has already been able to access £145,000 of external funding for the Elmore Park works. The North East Community Forest has also provided external funding for 2 new orchards in the city. One has recently been planted at Hetton Park, which you also visited yesterday, Mr Mayor, and the other one is due to be planted next week at Silksworth Welfare Park. These are both community orchards which will help local residents access healthier food in their respective localities, as well as reducing the carbon footprint of a small part of the city's food consumption. Looking at work that's taken place to help our green economy, in terms of grant funding for small and medium-sized businesses through the Regional Best project, Sunderland City Council led the Regional Performance Table with 21 approvals, 14 grants claimed to date and a total project value of £130,000 invested in energy efficiency improvements. And through the citywide ERDF-funded Breeze project, more than 30 businesses have now been supported with lighting, heating, insulation and a solar PV improvements. On renewable energy generation and storage, the Council has commenced formal market engagement with drilling contractors relating to the pilot boreholes proposed at Riverside, Sunderland, and will then seek to procure a contractor with a view to being on site later this year. On active and low carbon transport, in relation to the city centre mobility hub, 10 Nissan Leafs have now arrived and are being made available first to a small test group before then being rolled out shortly to all staff. We have also secured an extension of the current e-scooter trial area to include integration of Sunderland Strategic Transport Corridor Phase 3 and the surrounding areas, which will now allow for improved connectivity between employment, residential and retail zones as part of the trial. And work is now underway on the development of a social prescribing project, with the Council having received funding from the Department for Transport to develop a proposal. Focusing on the Red Hill and Southwick wards in the first instance, the pilot project will seek to improve people's health through increased levels of physical activity and active travel and provide clear links between infrastructure development and the social prescribing schemes. While working with public health colleagues, a proposal will be developed for submission to the Department of Transport by the end of April. In terms of consumption and waste, In February, the new state-of-the-art household waste and recycling facility at Pallion opened, which is 5 times the size of the former Beach Street facility and is capable of handling more than 1 million visits annually as we continue to encourage high levels of recycling right across the city. In addition, we have also continued 2 pilot projects bringing together smart city and low carbon ambitions. Working with the Digital Catapult from its regional base here in Sunderland to develop and trial digital innovations in improving energy efficiency 2 of our operational buildings, as well as in helping us to understand travel patterns and choices as we seek to encourage adoption of low carbon and active transport wherever it's appropriate. And finally, in terms of engagement, the Council has supported young people from Sunderland College and High School in Essen to participate in a digital exchange meeting to share thoughts on climate change and carbon reduction. The digital exchange session was part of a partnership project with Essen and its wider region called the Climate Initiative. And a series of follow-up sessions are being planned to enable Sunderland and Essen students to learn more about this city's approaches. And as we continue to encourage leadership on this important agenda from our young people, the Environmental, Green and Sustainable Young People's Group had their 3rd meeting on Monday the 14th of March in the City Hall. The group had a short tour of City Hall, took part in discussions, sharing thoughts and ideas on topics including local growing and sustainable transport. 2 EGS representatives will be attending the March 2030 Shadow Board later this week to continue to discuss the low carbon agenda with the partnership. We have also continued to progress work on the detail of our monitoring and reporting, including the Council's quarterly operational emissions data and learning from engagement into the World Wildlife Fund One Planet City Challenge. I hope this provides a useful and positive update on the work that is ongoing within the Council and with our partners. We will continue to provide updates to Council as appropriate going forward. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Can we note the update from the Deputy Leader? Thank you. We now move on to addressing the motions that were left from the last ordinary meeting of the Council. We'll deal with the first motion, which is in relation to the reform of rent charges. And I call upon Councillor Paul Gibson to read and move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Reform of rent charges. This Council notes the unequal status of rent charge payers compared to that of other freeholders or leaseholders. It recognises the potential for their exploitation by unscrupulous rent charge holders. The Council agrees to develop a strategy to ensure that 1. Any rent charges introduced, acquired or managed by this Council and or any of its wholly owned companies, joint ventures or any other delivery vehicles or organisations treats residents fairly and proportionately. And 2, wherever possible, residents subject to rent charges are able to have assets and services adopted by and provided by the Council for which they pay council tax. The Council also asks the Chief Executive to lobby the Government and ask local parliamentarians to do likewise, to request amendments to legislation in order to reform rent charges. These reforms should include, in all future developments, any rent charges should be set and paid by a company limited by guarantee and owned by the residents. In existing developments, following a ballot from residents in which a majority agree, a company limited by guarantee owned by the residents shall be formed. The company's purpose will be to purchase the rent charge holder's interest and to be paid rent charges by the residents. Where residents of existing developments vote against forming a company limited by guarantee, they shall be protected by amendments to sections 120 to 122 Law of Property Act 1925, so that a defaulter must be informed in writing of the arrears at the time and before any legal action. Any action must be through the courts, with the charge payer having the right to contest the level of the charge or the standard of service provided by the charge holder. All charge holders and their agents must be registered and bound by a code of conduct. 2. Charge payers must be informed of the names and business addresses of the charge holder and his agents. If the charge holder is a company or trust, then the name and business addresses of the secretary, directors or trustees must be provided. I so move, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haswell, do you second the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Second the motion and reserve the right to speak.
Councillor Gibson, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Before going into the details of this motion, I think a little historical background is in order. Since the Law of Property Act was passed in 1925, there are two forms of land ownership in the UK, leasehold and freehold. Leasehold is for a limited period, usually 99 years, in some cases longer. Householders owned a house or flat but not the land on which the house or flat's built. They've got to pay the freeholder a ground rent. In the case of flats and retirement villages, ground rents and a maintenance charge as well. Freeholders own their own home and the land on which they are built. Their tenure is unlimited, and as long as there's a successor, in theory, it can last until the end of the world, the end of the universe. Rent charges are a serious anomaly. They apply to freehold properties. In the 18th century, Britain began to industrialise and people flocked to towns and cities. Developers bought land from aristocrats and country gentlemen and built homes on them. The aristocrats were not content with a one-off profit and imposed a rent charge. The new freeholder had to agree to pay a certain amount each year for occupying the land. And the catch-22 is that he couldn't sell the land when he wanted to move on unless the prospective buyer agreed in writing to continue to pay the rent charge. These charges are called historic rent charges and they mainly apply to houses in Bristol, Somerset and Manchester. In 1977, the Labour government passed an act to abolish them. 1. No new rent charges to be created. 2. Existing charges to be phased out by 2037. 3. Rent charge holders could buy out their rent charge. But, unfortunately, there was a loophole in this well-intentioned legislation. This loophole applies to developments which have common parts, for example, roads, parking bays, landscaped areas, etc. In recent years, cash-strapped councils have found it impossible to finance the adoption of these common parts. So the developers form arm's-length companies that levy a charge on freeholders for maintaining the parts. Well, you could say, what's wrong with that? People buy a house, surely they know what they're walking into. Well, the problem is that developers usually end up selling their interest in this firm to a profiteering group who take over their role as rent charge holders. The rent charge payer has no option. He has to pay, he can't purchase the rent charge, and it can be gradually ramped up and up and up and up. In fact, purchasing the rent charge holder's interest is specifically ruled out by legislation. The new charge holder continually scours his records to seek out freeholders who are in arrears. A freeholder subject to rent charges has fewer protections than a leaseholder, and this motion hopefully will be a step to creating a level playing field. Sections 121 to 122 of the Law of Property Act 1925 apply. If a debt's more than 40 days old, the rent charge holder doesn't have to inform the individual that is in arrears. He doesn't have to give any kind of warning of legal action. He can just go along to land registry and register a lease in which he pays no money but in effect makes the property unsaleable until this person stumps up the cash. Now, cut out all this gobbledygook, we have a situation where the rent charge payer has no way out. There was a court case in 2016, Roberts and others versus Lawton and others. A firm called Moorgoyd Estates bought 15,000 administrators. Needless to say,
I understand. Right, members, we think that what has been proposed there as an amendment goes too far and is too wide-ranging and actually changes the original motion. So I'm moving from that and not allowing it.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Point of order. Yes, just under Rule of Procedure 14.7, the rules concerning amendments to motions read that words may be inserted or added as long as the effect is not to negate the motion. And I'd be grateful, perhaps, the length, as the leader suggested, is immaterial. That was an erroneous suggestion on the part of the leader. I was just wondering if perhaps you could elaborate as to in what way the amendment negates the original motion. Just some elaboration, if that would be acceptable.
Mr Mayor, through you, the Mayor's view was not that the amendment negated the original motion. He considered it was too wide-ranging, that it went too far out of the remit of the original motion.
Point of Mr Mayor, under the same rule as James just ruled, in what way is the amendment not within the scope of achieving a greater policing outcome for Sunderland, given the Police and Crime Commission has direct powers over our policing arrangements?
Mr Mayor, through you, I would advise that the ruling of the Mayor in the meeting is final and can't be challenged further.
We do have an amendment from the Liberal Democrats. And I understand Councillor Haswell wishes to move an amendment.
It's not quite as long, you'll be pleased to know, and hopefully the Liberal Democrat group can provide some compromise for everybody, not quite as long as that one. So, Mr Mayor, I would like to move the amendment, which is that for bullet point 4, after Washington, Coldfield and Sunderland, we add the words including the, and then after city centre, add Southwick and Farringdon. Insert a new bullet point 8, which is to encourage and foster links between police and school/youth clubs to educate young people as to the detrimental effects of antisocial behaviour. This should include the provision of facilities on council premises and/or on the council land for youth/community organisations. And then insert bullet point 9, to commit to liaise with the parents or guardians of children at risk of adopting criminal lifestyles through all appropriate agencies, as council is mindful of the impacts of a criminal record in adult life. And then insert bullet point 10, I'm going to mention it, Will, and extend an annual invite to the Police and Crime Commissioner to attend a meeting of full council and deliver an in-person report on policing performance and crime prevention in Sunderland, Washington, Bolton and Hetton. So move the amendment.
Councillor Crosby, I believe you second the amendment. So, Councillor Gibson, you second the amendment. Councillor Haswell, do you wish to speak to the amendment?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, on the slight deletion and amendment section, it is just a minor adjustment, simply because we don't just have a police kiosk in the city centre, we have a kiosk in Farringdon, and we have a proper station in, or a part-time station in Southwick. I wouldn't like to delete them because I don't want them to disappear under the auspices of not mentioning them. The next item is, Councillor Farthing was accurately shouting out, the next two items we already do. But when we're discussing policing, I think it's just inherent that we do include it. So, first of all, on bullet point 8, the council already does do a great deal to encourage the police to work together, particularly with our local schools. Now, what I think is important to recognise afresh is that post-COVID, that is almost completely broken down in terms of in-person engagement. It simply wasn't safe for, school children weren't at school, and it wasn't safe for the officers to be going into school. So I think it's just, our group feels that it's important to include it as an element, and that in-person engagement starts afresh. It's not to add any new duties, because, as you say, we already do it. Bullet point 9, again, the Council and TFC have a really good record of working with parents and guardians of the children most at risk, and we're in no way taken away from that. Again, it's very much focused on that COVID disruption piece. It's been very difficult for both council officers and staff at TFC to go into the homes of children and young people simply because that engagement's had to break down. So we feel that if we are really refocusing on achieving greater outcomes in policing in Sunderland, we should refocus on what the council did do very well and can do very well again. Finally, on bullet point 10, I now can't get there. Hang on, look at my fingers. Finally, on bullet point 10, we'd like to offer an annual invite to the Police and Crime Commissioner to come to full council and report back on policing in Sunderland, Horton, Hetton, Washington. Our colleagues at Newcastle City Council already get this, and I've got to ask the question, why are we treated as second best if we don't get a visit and that report? At the end of the day, the Police and Crime Commissioner is directly elected, but doesn't face public questioning, doesn't have the opportunity for that sort of challenge. And we, as the elected representatives of Sunderland, should have that opportunity, whether with the same party or different, to ask our questions on a report and what the Police and Crime Commissioner is doing about making Sunderland... Sorry? If you first of all don't heckle, I appreciate you coming...
not across the floor. Stick to you.
Thank you. Where wasn't it? Yes, so my colleagues, Paul obviously be speaking more about the amendments specifically, and Margaret Crosby is going to speak more about the main body. I did just want to give an explanation on this, but at this stage, we will be voting for the motion, whether it's amended or not, but we hope that everybody can come together.
The age of 100 and then robbing a bank and wondering if I'll get a criminal record. But joking aside, it is a serious question. Now, as an accountant, I've got a client and he's given me permission to tell you his story, because it does relate to this. When he was a boy of 15, he got involved in a playground brawl and he inflicted serious bodily harm on another student. And he was hauled before a juvenile court and was lucky not to get a custodial sentence. At the age of 18, he, in a fit of rage, kicked someone's door in, criminal damage. At the age of 21, he stole a ladder. At the age of 23, he had 3 counts of benefit theft. Then, what happened was he met a girl, and the girl set about civilising this thug. And she did a brilliant job. They married, they had a couple of kids. He did very well. He set himself up in business, and he led a blameless life for nearly 25 years. Then his business fell on hard times because of COVID, and he applied for jobs outside, mainly as a hospital porter and that type of thing. And he got turned down because we did a criminal record search of him, and despite his blameless life for 24 years and a recommendation from the local police, he got nowhere. In fact, his various friends, such as myself, clubbed round to help him out, so he's survived and his business is up and running again. But I think that demonstrates the point I made of the long-term effects on these young people, some of whom are very, very vulnerable themselves. So it's important to try and steer them away, and I think points 8 and 9 help. As for point 10, well, as has been pointed out, the policing arrangements have changed radically over the years, from 1829 to 1889, and of course that may not be fixed in bring local people more into contact with local policing. It enhanced policing by consent. Hence bullet point 10, to invite the Police and Crime
Rice, Heron, Thornton, Roundtree, Donaghy, and the leader has the right of reply.
Well, remember, members, this is on the amendment. Who was the first? Councillor Crosby.
I was going to speak on the substantive motion, Mr Mayor.
Oh, apologies.
Councillor Farthing.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I really wanted to respond to the points that were made by Councillor Haswell and Councillor Gibson in connection with juvenile crime. It is a fact, as Councillor Gibson said, that if you do get a criminal record as a young person, it does stay with you. And therefore, in Sunderland, for as long as I can remember, our Youth Justice Department has always determined to try and ensure that young people did not get criminal records by intervention. And despite COVID, we've continued to have intervention, and all sorts of operational matters have resumed, and they resumed probably almost a year ago, actually, in actual fact. And I can tell you that Operation Griffin, which the police deal with antisocial behaviour, I know from my own area is up and running, because I was speaking to the local sergeant just last week when he gave me the numbers of young people that had actually been, or whose parents had been engaged with in Operation Griffin. And it was some 30 in the sort of Washington area, mainly in the Ox Close area. So I know that's up and running. So I wanted to sort of put council's mind at rest that those sorts of activities are up and running currently. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Stewart. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I think the leader already mentioned when moving the original motion the failure of the Tories and the Liberal Democrats to support our police force, and with Northumbria being the hardest hit of any force in England and Wales, Mr Mayor, that was the view not just of me, but actually it's the view of the government's own National Audit Office. And I'm glad that in relation to the proposed amendment, in which I intend to vote in favour of the amendment, is that it's good to see that the Liberal Democrats, in not amending the original initial bullets, recognise the fact that their party do have some part to play in the position that we're in with regards to the lack of funding in the police force, and that the amendment motion, in effect, is stronger with the bullet points that they've proposed, but the fact that it does still recognise that initial concern or concern of the impact of the coalition government that they played a part in is why we're here having this debate tonight. The reality is, though, is that we still have 2,000 police officers less now than in 2010, as the leader pointed out. And I think it's no surprise that after all these years of austerity, the police struggle to cope with demands placed upon them, and at a time when many communities are facing antisocial behaviour at unprecedented levels, and Redhill Ward, that I represent, is no different. Our ward is faced with antisocial behaviour in the form of daily harassment of residents in Witherwack, Downhill and other estates, in particular by motorbikes and quads, often wearing hoods or balaclavas, not so often a helmet, I have to admit, but basically to disguise themselves from the CCTV that has been installed by this council on the estates. It's not pleasant, and I know from experience, having to quickly dodge out of the way from an oncoming quad. Our other key problem we have is youths deliberately damaging property, stealing bins and setting them alight. Most recently, setting fires on Bunny Hill and in the Downham complex near to the pond, just for the fun of it. And then, Mr. Mayor, harassing the fire brigade as they come to try and put the fires out. Living in parts of our community must be soul-destroying with the ongoing and relentless low-level antisocial behaviour and impact that has on a person's quality of life. With such behaviour taking place week after week, month after month, and sadly, Mr. Mayor, year after year. A particular issue in Red House and other areas is actually speeding traffic within our extensive 20 mile an hour zone. Sadly, the majority of drivers, and we've just had some further evidence this week, continue to ignore the speed limit, and that sadly includes bus drivers. Yes, we can put traffic calm measures in place or install a few vehicle-activated signs, but there is a real need to take more action, especially for those drivers often driving at high speed, driving past our local schools. Mr. Mayor, my anger is not directed at the police or the police commissioner. Indeed, when my colleague, Councillor Usher, before he became a councillor, just recently, challenged the commissioner on these very points, she agreed to come to Redhill Ward to see the problems for herself, as indeed she has been to other parts of the city when she's been requested to attend. We learned from her that she is just as frustrated as we are at the lack of resources, and where a choice needs to be made between dealing with a serious crime or dealing with a bin being burnt out, there can only ever be one answer in relation to that question. The real crime is by those who have created the circumstances where such a choice has to be made, Mr. Mayor. And that leads us back to the failed governments turning their backs on the police and turning their backs on local communities that they serve. During our meeting with the Commissioner, she made it clear that while they had insufficient resources themselves to act alone, they will be willing partners working with other stakeholders in making communities safer, and referred to the highly successful SARA project in Southwick that the leader mentioned earlier. Indeed, joint working with stakeholders is now a key aspect of the Commissioner's recently adopted police and crime plan. With little likelihood of the government coming to the rescue of Northumbria Police, this motion, amended motion, gives the council a list of key issues and key activities raised by residents that as a council we should be looking to support. I am therefore looking forward to jointly working with Northumbria Police on these, and particularly like the idea of the annual respect plan.
Councillor, the time is up. If you
I am down to my last two sentences, Mr. Mayor. The annual respect plan, and it will give the ability of residents to measure our success as a city with regards to responding to these. Ultimately, though, I think blame needs to be placed where it should, and I think it relates very much to the Conservative Party, and they really should be condemned for their failure to support their police and their failure to support our local communities. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can I remind members we do have quite a list of speakers, and if you wish to be fair to your colleagues, to give them an opportunity to speak, because we will run in to the point where, as you did agree some meetings back, that this meeting will end at a certain time. I do have two very important parts of the agenda which I will deal with. One is very important. The notices need to be published quite quickly. So when someone speaks, if you'll keep it within the 5 minutes, and if you don't wish to speak because you've heard what you were going to say, I would appreciate it if you would just stand down. So the next speaker is Councillor Mann.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to speak to both the substantive motion and the amendment, because I don't think there's any councillor in this city who wouldn't want to see a greater policing outcome for our residents and our city. In fact, it's always good, Mr Mayor, to see activity within these council chambers and committee rooms which seek to work proactively with Northumbria Police and other agencies to make our communities and cities a better place and a safer place to live and to work and to raise our children. Likewise, it's always disappointing when a Labour motion begins its notes to council on an otherwise sound idea with the words austerity, government cuts, slashed budgets, and it's more of the endless Labour blame, 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 and blah, blah, blah that we incessantly hear across these chambers. And we listen to you. If you, I've said this at the last meeting.
Excuse me, Councillor Mann.
Well,
if you have a point of order,
please, Mr.
you know what
Mayor.
the procedure is.
Order,
Carry on.
please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anyway, there is always a need to tighten the belt if there's a national debt which will impact on our economy. Historically, severe measures are sometimes needed in severe circumstances, clearly something that the Labour group in Sunderland have no concept of. No one across our city or our country wants to see cuts to essential services that affect our lives and our communities. But equally, no one wants to hear excuses or witness the finger-pointing that the Labour Party in Sunderland are so keen to do at every opportunity, especially when it comes to working together for the best outcome. I'll just leave that with you for a second. It puts good, because it takes a little bit longer for the older members to work it out, doesn't it? Especially when it comes to working together for the best outcome. It puts a blight on inspirational... Mr Mayor, order,
Mr Mayor,
please.
point of order. Can that woman withdraw that remark?
Which one was that?
About being old in this chamber.
Duly removed, Councillor Gibson.
Withdrawn.
Withdrawn, Councillor Gibson. Especially when it comes to working together for the best outcome.
Councillor,
sorry to interrupt, I'll accept, Mayor Sunderland. I'm wanting to refer the Members' Code of Conduct here. I'll accept, perhaps Pamela Mann should make a comment about the age of councillors, but no councillor should be addressed in this chamber as that woman.
Yes,
Councillor Mann, do you wish to continue?
It puts a blight, Mr Mayor, on inspirational initiatives such as the Southwick Altogether Raising Awareness project. Speaking of the SARA project, this is the type of project I would welcome with open arms in St Anne's. Having police as a visible presence alongside representatives from Housing, Council, Health and Education could provide much needed support right where it's needed. One of the main advocates of this project, the Police Crime Commissioner, Kim McGuinness, spoke loud and clear on antisocial behaviour when she met residents in St Anne's with our MP Sharon Hodgson. Disgracefully, only a small number of residents, one of the three ward councillors, the Labour one of course, and the Labour candidate, an ex-councillor, were on the guest list. Mr Mayor, the fact that the two Conservative councillors in our ward and the neighbourhood police were not invited was, in Miss Hodgson's words, an omission. Really? So it wasn't a blatant campaign platform then? And it's not the only one.
To report incidents to the police. The web system is failing left, right and centre. It simply doesn't work. Residents are sick and tired of putting up with crime and disorder. They're quite frankly so sick and tired of trying to report such incidents that their trust and confidence in the police in Sunderland must surely be at an all-time low.
There are 20-30 mile per hour zones. To produce an annual respect plan for the city, detailing how the council and its partners will work collaboratively with crime and the fear of crime. To encourage and foster links between the police and schools, youth clubs, to educate young people as to the detrimental effects of antisocial behaviour. This should include the provision of facilities on council premises and or on council land for youth/community organisations. To commit to liaison with the parents or guardians of children at risk of adopting criminal lifestyles to all appropriate agencies, as council is mindful of the impact of a criminal record in adult life, and extend an annual invite to the Police and Crime Commissioner to attend a meeting of full council and deliver an in-person report on policing performance and crime prevention in Sunderland, Washington, Houghton and Hetton. We now vote on the amendment. We'll have to do it in the usual way. Sorry, Councillor Crosby.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There's not actually a lot I've got to add because people have mentioned traffic issues and antisocial behaviour that I was going to talk about. The only thing that was left really was the respect meeting that the motion was talking about. And I'd like to see members of the public and councillors to be having a greater involvement in that rather than it just being the Cabinet. That's all. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. Point of order, if I may. Just under Rule 17.3, Mr Mayor, would it be appropriate to vote by affirmation? It seems to me that all groups are agreed on the amendment, rather than having to go through a show of hands or a named vote.
Do we agree with that? So we agree the motion.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Where's that come from? Oh, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Do you know what? I'm afraid I don't know the rule of the point of order, given that it's relating to motions carrying forward. In previous full councils, people who requested in writing to speak at motions were called first, and that opportunity hasn't been afforded because I put in to speak on this motion back in January, and I just wondered what the process actually was for that and why it hasn't happened this time.
At the village centre shops, that's double yellow lines. The shop has large vehicles delivering to the mini-mart and chippy at all times of the day. The HGVs have obscured lines of vision for safe crossings to the shops and inconsiderate parking, stopping the vehicles being able to park safely to deliver. The residents request that there is signage to highlight for visitors to the shops that there is a parking area just directly across the road to enable safe parking for the shops and community pub. The residents would like the bus link removed. Over the years, there have been several near misses and one child injured who had to be hospitalised, with drivers trying to speed through regardless because they just want to get through. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hartner.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a petition to present on behalf of residents of Seaburn, 119 people objecting to proposals by Sunderland Highways Department to close off roads in Seaburn, therefore creating additional congestion and rat runs in the area. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a petition that I'm proud to present for 30-plus residents of Broadstairs Court and Grindon Broadway in St Anne's, and they request that the council hear and act upon the following petition regarding parking issues and damage to highway and pavement and increased litter at Broadstairs Court and Broadway properties. In 2016, Sansec Developments Broadway Limited appealed against a planning decision regarding the site of the former City Council Social Services at Broadway House, Springwall Road, SR4 8NW. The appeal was allowed, the former building was demolished and development went ahead. The land is now occupied by a co-op Costa, Vets for Pets and Greggs. in the appeal decision were successful with the council, but were disappointed when the decision was to our garages is being blocked, pavements are being obstructed by...
In that area, I have a second petition signed by 90 residents of Vicarage Close, calling upon the council to reimburse them for costs associated with the damage done to their properties by Persimmon. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have two petitions to present. Firstly, on behalf of residents of Ashbury Grove, Kenton Grove, Burscough Crescent, Edgeworth Crescent, sorry, Burscough, anyway. It's been a long night. It's on behalf of a lot of people. We, the undersigned, call on Sunderland City Council to install CCTV temporarily or permanently on the Tissix field. This is to help our local councillors and policing team to crack down on antisocial behaviour in the area. This petition has been created after a run of garage burglaries and graffiti in the area, which needs addressing immediately and collectively. Secondly, on behalf of residents of Bloomfield Court, we, the undersigned, call on Sunderland City Council to remove the shrubs on the bank outside of Bloomfield Court. The shrubs are not pleasing to look at, and over the summer months, trap litter which residents are having to remove. We call on the council to resolve this situation by removing the shrubs at the earliest possible opportunity and planting grass on the bank, as they have done on other inclines in the area. This will, in our view, create greater visual amenity and stop residents having to clean up other people's rubbish. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we agree to refer these to the appropriate chief officers?
Point of order, Mr Mayor. On 14.27, duties of Mayor preside. It's gone off, sorry. Duties of the Mayor presiding. It's just a question on the members' questions. Will they be carried over to the future meetings? I appreciate that isn't a rule we've currently got, and I appreciate you may not be able to answer now. And could you...
I believe you will get a written answer, am I right? Each question will be answered in writing. So we'll move to the written questions by members of the public. I'll read them out and then I'll offer the relevant person to respond. The first one is war memorials, and this is from a David Sloan. The two war memorials from the Civic Centre foyer have been relocated to Neslam at Washington. This museum has an entry charge. Would they not be on the public display in City Hall or City Museum? The public will then give them the respect they deserve. Councillor Williams, I understand you're responding to that one.
I am, thank you, Mr Mayor. In response to David's question, memorials, plaques and commemorative items from the Civic Centre have been loaned to the North East Lands C&A Museum, Sunderland Museum and Winter Gardens and Sunderland Maritime Heritage Museum, organisations who form part of the Heritage Sunderland Partnership. The partnership brings together approximately 45 heritage sites and practitioners and aims to grow the city's unique heritage. All loaned items are subject to insurance cover and short-term arrangements. These include a memorial to 140 Sunderland men who fell in the Boer War, which is now on display at the entrance to the main entrance of the North East Lands C&A Museum in Washington, and a plaque commemorating employees from the Corporation of Sunderland who made the ultimate sacrifice in the First World War, which is set to go on display there in time for Easter. Nelsam does charge an entrance fee, £6.50 for adults, £3.50 for children, and over 60s receive a concession of £3.50. Under 5s and carers pay 50p. Entrance costs were considered as part of all the relocations. However, NELSAM were deemed to be the best fit for the items as they are committed to preserving war artefacts and have an outstanding customer service record, achieving TripAdvisor Certificate of Excellence in 2017, 18 and 19 and their Traveller's Choice Awards in 20. Obviously, these memorials will be moved around sites as time moves forward, and if it does become an issue, perhaps Peter would like to get in touch and we'll look to see what we can do to arrange that viewing. Thank you.
The next question is from Peter Middleton, a resident of Sunderland. Sulphur hexafluoride, in brackets SF6, is so far the gas with the strongest known greenhouse effect. Its contribution to the greenhouse effect is about 23,000 times that of CO2. As it's widely welcomed across the city that Sunderland is becoming a green city, will the council confirm that no electrical switchgear in the new City Hall contains the SF6? And all future developments will also use only environmental safe alternative, and if not, why? Councillor Roundtree, I understand you're responding to this.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I can confirm that the electrical switchgear within City Hall does not contain SF6. The Council does not have any specific policies regarding the use of SF6 within future developments within the city. However, policy BH2 of the adopted core strategy and development plan sets out a range of sustainable design and construction criteria which major developments will be expected to adhere to.
Thank you. The next question is from Peter Noble, a resident of Sunderland. Sunderland City Council have made considerable efforts to tell residents to test regularly and isolate when required by law. What were the COVID isolation rules covering Sunderland on the 10th of February 2022? And if somebody tested positive on that date, when is the earliest opportunity that their isolation could end? I understand Councillor Checkers is not with us. Is there anyone? Hey, sorry, Councillor. I thought you'd popped out. It's the mask. Councillor Checkers, sorry about that.
That's not the first time that's been said, Mayor. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'd like to thank Mr Noble for the question. I'll answer the question in two parts as per the two parts to the question. First part, the COVID isolation rules as at the 10th of February were any person with one or more of the main symptoms of COVID-19, which are a temperature, cough, change or loss of taste or smell, should isolate and access a PCR test. Any person who is tested positive for COVID-19 should self-isolate for up to 10 full days or longer if they continue to have a high temperature. The self-isolation period includes the day the symptoms started or the day the positive test was taken if they do not have symptoms, and the next 10 full days. A person who is tested positive for COVID-19 may be able to end self-isolation earlier than the 10 full days. To end self-isolation early, the following would have to apply. Take a lateral flow test from day 5 to see if they test negative or positive for COVID-19. Tests should be taken on consecutive days. If individual tests negative on both days from day 5 onward, they do not have a high temperature, then they can end their isolation early. The earliest someone would be able to end their self-isolation would be day 6 or thereafter if they continue to test positive. If someone continues to test positive up to and including day 10, they must complete the full 10 days of self-isolation. And for the second part of the question, that if somebody tested positive on the 10th of February 2022, when is the earliest their self-isolation could end? If somebody tested positive and their symptoms started on the 10th of February, or they did not have symptoms and took their test on the 10th of February, they would have to isolate until 11:59 p.m. on the 20th of February, but could end isolation early from the 16th of February onward if they received a negative lateral flow test from day 5 onward. However, if the person took their test on the 10th of February, but the symptoms had started before this date, the isolation period would start from the recognised date of symptom onset, which could be earlier than the 10th of February. The recognised self-isolation period would be advised by NHS Test and Trace following the report of a positive test result and assessment of symptoms. There are a broad range of symptoms used by NHS Test and Trace to determine the actual start date of the isolation period. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. The next question is from Lynn Vera. Roker Park's bandstand is supposed to be a stunning centrepiece, but is currently in a state of disrepair and has had to be cordoned off for public safety. Can the leader explain why this has been allowed to happen when we can expect the repairs, and if they will impact the plans to open a cafe in the Roker Park Lodge? Councillor Williams, I believe you're responding.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. So, in undertaking maintenance to the bandstand in 2021, it was identified that substantial repair work is required, particularly to the roof. Consequently, the decision was taken to incorporate this essential work into a wider repair, restoration and conservation project. Temporary works were carried out as an interim measure and the area was cordoned off for safety reasons, pending the allocation of the necessary project funding. We anticipate completion of the project within the next 12 months. And just to add, the bandstand project will not impact on the plans to open a new cafe facility in the park. Thank you.
The next question is from Judith Porter. On behalf of Barnes Pallion and Millfield Residents Association, I wish to ask the portfolio holder for housing to make publicly available a register of landlords across the city so that residents, councillors and community groups with concerns about housing issues or the state of a property can identify who owns the premises. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Due to data protection, the release of these details is not possible. However, the Council understands the frustrations and have in place a range of support mechanisms in dealing with empty homes and properties that are under ownership by private landlords. We would ask any resident in the area to make contact with the Council's empty homes or environmental health team with any local concerns, and these will be investigated. We've also got the Sunderland accredited landlord service that aims to improve the physical and management standards of private rented homes within the city. And I would encourage all members to direct landlords to become a member of that scheme. We held a private landlord roadshow event in this chamber only a few weeks ago, which was supported by the East Area Committee, which brought landlords together with council officers and how we can move forward and improve those standards together across the city. Again, I would just like to remind members to encourage residents to report to the Recommended Housing Services team and also to the landlord accreditation scheme that's also available. And thank you, Judith Porter, for bringing this important question to Council and giving us the opportunity to highlight what services are available and what's available to support landlords as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yvonne Gray, resident of Sunderland. Labour's recent manifesto leaflet states that residents will get free bin replacement, with no caveats or qualifications. But under the actual policy, is it right that only a fraction of people will be eligible to receive a free replacement? Will the Environmental Services Cabinet member please confirm that the policy contained within the 2022 budget does not apply to all residents of the city equally? And I believe the leader is responding to that. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'd like to thank the early notification of the question from Yvonne Gray. In two quick words, the answers are no and yes, Mr Mayor. It is not right that only a fraction of people will be eligible to receive a free replacement. All residents will be able to receive a free replacement, and the policy does apply to all residents of the city equally, and a bit of detail behind it is as follows. In 2017, the policy on charging for replacement bins was introduced. The policy has been delivered in this way since, and a £25 charge applied. Bins are designed to last for many years, but unfortunately there are some people who do suffer unacceptable attacks and crimes in the theft and burning out of their bins. This form of antisocial behaviour and I am sure you will agree, must be addressed. And we work with residents to try and tackle these issues, but residents should not be punished for others' activities. Like all policies and practices, it is necessary to review their appropriateness on a regular basis. Therefore, we undertook a review of the bin replacement charge arrangements and considered the issues and concerns raised by residents and local ward councillors. The bin replacement policy was discussed with the Economic Prosperity Scrutiny Committee on the 8th of March 2022, and feedback and views made at that meeting were reviewed along with the wider economic situation with the increases to living costs. It was therefore decided that we would pursue a policy of free bins for all for bins that are stolen or vandalised beyond repair for 12 months, starting from the 1st of April 2022. And this policy was agreed by Cabinet yesterday on the 22nd of March 2022. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The next question is from Deborah Waller, a resident of Sunderland. Could the Leader of the Council please advise me when was there a Council meeting to discuss the closure of the subway next to Aldi? What party was the councillors from that voted against this closure? And what organisation was paying for the subway to be removed? As the Liberal councillors Crosby, O'Brien and Edgeworth have stated in a letter to the community of Sandhill that it was the Labour councillors that stopped the closure of the subway, even though they had funding in place to remove it. And Councillor Roundtree, I believe you're responding to this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank Deborah Waller for the question. I can confirm that there has been no council meeting in which the closure of the subway next to Aldi at the Hastings Hill roundabout had been voted upon, and there has been no council budget set aside for such a proposal. I suspect, Mr. Mayor, that this is the usual Liberal Democrat campaign tactic to mislead and misinform the public. Something they have done time and time again, as they have nothing of genuine substance to offer the communities they supposedly represent. The people of Sunderland are now seeing through this, as evidenced by Labour's resounding win in Redhill. And I would like to take this opportunity, Mr. Mayor, to welcome Councillor John Usher to the chamber.
Next question is from Ray Bell, a resident of Sunderland. The bowling greens in Roker Park are an important community asset and are enjoyed by 2 resident bowling clubs and visiting teams, individual bowlers and also spectators. As far as I am aware, the bowling greens in Roker Park are the only 2 in the city where dogs on leads are prohibited by the PSPO. This has led to fines being handed out to spectators who knew no better. The bowling clubs have worked with ward councillors on a petition calling on dogs on leash to be allowed to enter as is standard in the city. This has had over 200 signatories. We appreciate that there are legal processes to follow, but can the Leader of the Council explain why is it taking so long to secure such a simple and popular change? And I believe Councillor Williams responds to this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The process for the implementation of a Public Spaces Protection Order, that's a PSPO, is a legal process and includes for public consultation and agreement by Cabinet. The process was duly followed, and those residents who have signed the petition had the opportunity to comment as part of the public consultation, with 93% of residents who responded agreeing to the proposed dog control restrictions across the city. Cabinet endorsed this order on the 23rd of March 2021 for 3 years. Sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Has that stopped your hearing? Do I need to start again, or can I just continue? Right. Thank you. You shouldn't have said that. Gave you an offer. Okay, so we'll go back to there were 93% of residents who responded agreeing to the proposed dog control restrictions across the city. Cabinet endorsed this order on the 23rd of March 2021 for 3 years. Therefore, the request to review any changes to restrictions within the bowling green of Roker Park would not usually be considered until the refresh of the agreed order takes place in early 2023. Having stated the above, however, I can advise that we are looking to an agreed process with identified criteria for when requests to amend the PSPOs are received during the life of an order, and I anticipate this will be complete by the end of April. Thank you.
There are two questions, and we have bunked them together because they're about the same subject. The first one is from a Sharon McCarthy, a resident of Sunderland. Between April 20 and July 21, Durham County Council spent under 10% of what Sunderland Council did at the Holiday Inn, Washington, to house council placements. The leader previously blamed Durham placements as being the cause of a huge rise in antisocial behaviour, including drug dealing and sexual offences. What learnings has the leader and his council taken from the chaos caused by the community? I'll move on to A. Lawton, a resident of Sunderland. It has been reported that Sunderland Council have opposed government plans to house refugees at a hotel on Wessington Way. Why did Sunderland Council not oppose housing sex offenders at the Holiday Inn in Washington South, when Councillor Miller has continually told residents that his council was instructed to do so by the government? Leader, I believe you're responding to this.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor, and I'll answer the questions in two parts. The Council always ensures that it meets its statutory homeless duties, along with rigorous safeguarding in all cases that it manages. Due to government guidance, the Council had little choice but to utilise the Holiday Inn for managing some of its homeless cases. All cases were fully assessed and security was placed in the hotel during this time. Once the government guidelines changed, the Council ceased the use of the hotel. The Council no longer uses the Holiday Inn in the provision of its homelessness duties. And I must stress to people who may not be aware that at the time, the Everyone In regulation from government during the COVID pandemic placed the duty of care in councils to house everyone. There was to be no homeless, and that included offenders leaving prison. All councils had a duty of care to have to home them somewhere, and that involved them homing them in hotels. And in Sunderland's case, both Durham and Sunderland primarily placed residents in the Holiday Inn, as did occasionally Gateshead. So that was why residents saw that activity at the Holiday Inn. It was caused by government policy, and the council had to deal with it that way. As soon as we found out there were issues with the people staying in the Holiday Inn, I instructed the council to cease using the Holiday Inn, and we stopped using it immediately. Durham continued to place homeless people in the Holiday Inn, and as far as I'm aware, they may still be doing so today. Regarding the second part, where we've got refugees at a hotel on Wessington Way, the difference between that and the difference between the Holiday Inn is that the Wessington Way is not covered by the Everyone In regulations because that has ceased. This council was actively saying that that was the wrong place to put anyone, refugees, asylum seekers, the homeless. It was not a good place to put them, but the government has said all councils will take people and you're getting these people, and we've got a contract with that hotel, so that's where they're going. We did try and stop it because we could argue the case. We could not do that with the Holiday Inn in Washington because we were under government legislation for the COVID crisis, and I have made this clear several times, but people keep on asking the question thinking there'll be a different answer. There isn't. The council did what it could and we did it with our partners to the best of our ability. The Wessington scenario is a different scenario altogether. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. The next question is from Samantha Cosgrove, a resident of Sunderland. Following a lack of communication from Councillor James Warren, the Leader of the Council promised me I would receive a call from Councillor Warren. I've yet to receive any correspondence from either councillor or on behalf of the Residents Association that I chair. Can the Leader of the Council please explain why I've not received the phone call he promised? The residents are concerned about antisocial behaviour and lack of support from the councillors. And I believe Councillor Miller is responding to this one.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor, and I do thank Samantha Cosgrove for her question. In response, my group will always respond as quickly as possible, aiming to resolve any of our residents' or businesses' concerns. I've spoken with Councillor Warren about this, and he has confirmed that he is not aware of any unanswered queries, and I can assure Ms Cosgrove that we will be in touch with her and the Residents Association, however, as a matter of urgency, just to ensure nothing has been missed. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. The last question is from Kevin Clark. My question is that why neighbourhood enforcement officers patrolling during the day while on a night time in the Leader's own ward, Washington South, innocent people live in fear because of feral jobs. Can I ask what the PCC stance on this, as you did state that you were going to reopen Washington Police Station, which is more important than daft vanity? To be honest, there should be a vote of no confidence in the Leader and his cabinet. And Councillor Rowntree, you're answering that one, I believe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I would like to thank Kevin Clark for his question. And the neighbourhood wardens currently work a shift pattern which includes a mixture of day, evening and weekend working. This varies depending on the time of year. Wardens are deployed based on intelligence, including reports from residents, and I would encourage residents to report any concerns to the council or the police so that resources and the enforcement team can be applied accordingly. Mr Mayor, I cannot speak for the PCC. Mr Clark would need to contact her directly if he wishes to know her stance. I will say, though, that she is doing an excellent job considering her limited resources and the loss of police officers due to Tory cuts. While both the Leader and his cabinet are empowered to act on the wishes of residents, we have no authority over policing. We do, however, work proactively in partnership with them. To be clear, the Leader did not state that he was going to reopen Washington Police Station. He did say that he would work to have it more open to the public. Yes. In response to the last part of Mr Clark's question, to be absolutely and abundantly clear, neither the Leader nor the Cabinet will be standing down. We will continue to work our hardest to make this city the very best it can be, and I would suggest that he join us in our aspirations for the city by voting Labour in the May elections.
Right, colleagues, we now move on to the last item of tonight, and any business that is left will be carried on to the next ordinary council meeting. Report of the Human Resources. Can the Leader please move and approve the adoption of the report of the Human Resources?
I so move, Mr Mayor.
Deputy Leader, do you second the report?
I second the report, Mr Mayor, and reserve the right to speak.
Leader, would you like to speak to the report?
I do have something ready, Mr Mayor, but I feel that time is moving on, so I'll say that it's fully laid out and leave it there.
Thank you very much. Deputy Leader, do you wish to...
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd also like to...
But the ask was at the time and remains that there needs to be a clear mechanism to have an anonymised report provided to councillors when there are larger payments made, say, above a salary threshold of 5%. So just that comment. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Deputy Leader, do you wish to speak?
I've nothing further to add, Mr Mayor.
Lady, you have the right to reply.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. At the end of the day, regarding Councillor Haswell's sensible comments there, we will be coming back in September as part of that process of trying to make that better so that there is more confidence in the process going forward.
Thank you. Do you accept the report of the Human Resources Committee? Thank you. All the very best to you that won't be coming back. You've made hard work of it tonight, my colleagues. Thank you very much.
Please be standing for the record.